Okay. Assuming that you have watched the previous video in which I explained and summarized this passage, I'm going to take you through the questions now. If you haven't watched that video, please watch that before you proceed with the questions. All of the following can be inferred about the narrative in Boccaccio's Decameron, except option A says the women's conduct in the work is in stark contrast with the depiction of same in Victorian novels. Second paragraph tells us that the women in this novel took the initiative to talk to the boys in a very tactful, well-bred way, making it clear that it was no invitation to rape. It is also written the code of behavior is impressively liberal. So while the women depicted in Boccaccio's Decameron are liberal, the ones in Victorian novels or in Victorian age were more sophisticated, and that is why author says that the society has advanced and it has not even been a century. In short, these women were more liberal, they were bolder than the Victorian women, which means they were in stark contrast to the sophisticated Victorian women. Can be inferred, eliminated. B says it is set in the realistic backdrop of a great affliction. Boccaccio's Decameron is set in the realistic backdrop of a great affliction. The last paragraph talks about the gruesome darkness of Black Death against which this Decameron is set, which means the historical context of a great affliction, that is Black Death, is correct, which works the character's body and mind. Comes from this: the plague is seen working psychologically as well as physically to the extent of moral liberation. It has corrupted the manners and morals in addition to destroying life. Diversion and escape are prudent. So this diversion and this corruption of morals is a paraphrase for extent of moral liberation. So people are not morally restrained anymore because it has the great problem, the great affliction has worked to their psychological and moral freedom. So B can also be inferred, eliminated. The indulgent and venturesome young women. This part is fine. Indulgent and venturesome young women. From the second paragraph, they were liberal, unprudish. So they venturesome also. They went on a trip together. They planned their adventure. They belong to an elite class. Yes, they were upper class girls. And their adventurous journey takes them to inevitable death. Well, this plot is that of triumph of death and not of Boccaccio's Decameron. So this cannot be inferred. This is factually twisted. C is the answer. The women characters are empowered and unrestrained by mores of their age. The women characters are empowered because here it is written that implicit command of the situation. The women, the ladies, frequently laugh, occasionally blush, while never losing their implicit command of the situation, which means they are empowered. Also, they are unrestrained by the mores of their age, comes from the second paragraph again. They are not shy. They are free to laugh. They are free to go on adventure trips. So unrestrained by the mores of their age. D can also be inferred, eliminated. Which of the following statements best summarizes the author's opinion about Boccaccio's view of his own work? Now, Boccaccio viewed his work as not being his best work. We're talking about Decameron here. So he thought that it was not his best work, though it became famous. And second, in the third paragraph, it is also written that the work shocked and frightened the creator. Decameron eventually shocked and frightened Boccaccio, who thus, unwittingly or not, recognized the force of its literary power. So he inadvertently, finally, eventually, inevitably understood the power, he realized the power of his own work, literary power of his own work. So these two are written about Boccaccio's view of his work. Let's see. A says Boccaccio held more regard for the Decameron. Quite the opposite. He did not consider it his best work. Boccaccio was later dismayed. Well, this word dismayed comes from frightened and shocked. But he was nonetheless convinced by the literary power of Decameron. So he was convinced, yes, because he recognized the force of its literary power. So B can be inferred. Boccaccio was heartened that the Decameron was avidly read and translated. Though this is factually true, Decameron was avidly read and translated. What was Boccaccio's reaction to that is not known, out of the scope of this passage. So he wasn't heartened necessarily. Boccaccio was overly critical of his own work, too general, too broad. He was critical only of Decameron, one of his works, and not all of his works in general. Also, overly is a bit exaggerated, so D also gets eliminated. According to the author, the Decameron differs from Divine Comedy in all but which of the following. So except, we'll find three differences and eliminate. It was set in Florence. Passage does not really make it clear whether it was set in Florence or not. So we don't know whether it is a difference. Let's keep it in doubt. B says it is written in didactic style. Divine Comedy is written in didactic style. The third paragraph tells us about Decameron. It says Decameron was undidactic, entertaining, and openly scabrous. And it is said in comparison to Divine Comedy, which means that Divine Comedy is the opposite. It is didactic, not entertaining, and not even scabrous. So it is written in a didactic style. That is correct. It has a tendency to be tedious. Tedious means boring, because it is not entertaining. Opposite of entertaining, yes, tedious can be inferred. It was not humorous, yes, not scabrous. So BCD are clearly inferable from the passage, which makes A the correct answer. Which of the following statements is true about Decameron in relation to works by other writers? Let's see. The semi-erotic visions in this work resemble those in Dante's poem Divine Comedy. Something about semi-erotic visions is being said here. Women in this novel have been portrayed as fires, intense, sometimes horrifyingly palpable, and the semi-erotic visions read like they are similar to real life cantos from Dante's poem. Understand, author has compared the realism of erotic scenes in Decameron to the realism of the cantos in Divine Comedy. The comparison is made between realism of erotic scenes and the realism of cantos in Divine Comedy, and not the scenes themselves. So A is a twisted fact. The scenes are not similar. Dante's Divine Comedy does not necessarily have erotic scenes, but the realism of the erotic scenes resembles the realism of the cantos in Divine Comedy. That is what the idea is. B says it was an unprecedented portrayal of spiritual freedom, out of context, out of scope. The passage never mentions that this novel has this theme, and that it is the first novel with such a theme. Neither of these pieces of information is present in the passage. It anticipated the easy chemistry between two sexes of Shakespearean works. Okay. This paragraph, last line, it says Boccaccio has idealized a little. Da da da. He puts forward freedom and humor and good manners between the two sexes. So there is freedom between the two sexes, there is humor, and there is good manners in Boccaccio's work, which foreshadows the Shakespearean world of X and Y. These must be the characters of his work, Shakespeare's work. Foreshadow means inspires. So the idea here is that the freedom, humor, and good manners between the two sexes is a theme which inspires Shakespeare's later works. Therefore, C can be inferred. It anticipated. Anticipate is to precede and to inspire. In context, the word means this: to precede and to inspire. So it anticipated the easy chemistry. Easy chemistry comes from freedom, humor, and good manner between the two sexes of Shakespeare's works. D is quite the opposite. It was not unlike the triumph of death. It was unlike it. Not unlike would mean it was similar to the triumph of death. In the first paragraph, it is written that it reverses the standard form of morality set in triumph of death, which means D is opposite to fact. It's contrary to fact. D also eliminated. So these are the answers, guys. Hope you enjoyed solving this passage, an interesting passage. Subscribe to the channel. Please do like the video. Your VM signing off.